Hey everybody, I'm Sean Robinson,
I'm Carson Grubaugh. Welcome to Living the Line.
and today we have a very special guest, friend of the pod, Mr. Royal Boiler. How you doing,
Gentlemen.
Brandon?
Good. How are you guys?
Good.
Oh, it's nice to have you back, man. I've been missing you.
I
Thank you.
I have been missing my Brandon time as well. It has been it has been very sad with
Yeah, we've all been having lives, and it gets in the way of just sitting around and talking about 1980s manga.
yeah. What the
Yeah.
fuck? We can't spend more time just shooting the breeze about some paper and ink. I don't really get it.
Yeah, I know.
But
What's
yeah.
life worth living for then?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, we're going to find out today because we are going to do our best, our damnedest to get through the rest of Appleseed Volume 2. And for those of you who have been following along with this channel for a year, and when did we interview you, Brandon, about Rain Like Hammers? That must have been like a year and 2 months ago or something like
It was
that.
2 apartments ago. It's been a while.
It's coming up on 2 years, man. Like it's
Two leases ago, yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, so when we originally talked about it, we're all Appleseed enthusiasts, and we tore through book one in a measly 3 hours and 45 minutes, and then book two has so far defeated us. But luckily, we are going to be aided in our speed read here by Shirow's storytelling, because Appleseed Book Two is quite an exciting action philosophy book. I think it's safe to say. And finally,
Yeah.
we get to the action part here.
We made it past the philosophy, and I apologize because that made me slow us down very much. Because I was like, every panel, I could tell you 5 books to go.
That was great though, because my childhood reading of Appleseed was like talk, talk, talk. Let's skip the pages, and then you'd actually had the education and the understanding of Shiro's madness to keep up with him.
I'm trying. I gotta admit, the thing I'm most curious about is now that I think I understand what he's on about, he's trying to make some further point that I still not sure I get what the hell he's saying.
Right, and I think that I'm going to make the argument that Appleseed Volume Two is essentially structured as a philosophical experiment, a natural experiment. He's created a fictional experiment where the characters explicitly tell you what it is they're trying to argue about, which is basically the nature of humanity. Are we going to be better off if we all can agree with each other and get along with each other, and we can engineer those things to happen, or are we all better off if we are potent, virile individuals who all have are there capabilities that we lose out on as we shave off the edges? And then, having sort of established this as the central conflict in the natural experiment, he fictionally allows us to run the experiment by having the city computer take over everything and essentially try to kill everybody, or at least that's what it seems like at first. And so we get to sort of run this natural experiment because we have two groups of people who are going to be against the city computer here. One obviously led by the city planner, who is a Bioid, and one who's going to be led by Diunen, our hero, and Briaros, both of which are natural humans, even though
Rugged individualist.
Is he a human? I thought he was a robot.
Well, he's
a cyborg.
augmented after his act.
Augmented human. Okay.
Yeah, remember he's got his octopus brain and everything. He's able to run his body. He's got an unusual brain where he's sort of segmented out mentally and can run this body in a way that most fleshy, pulpy people wouldn't be able to.
Oh, I didn't know. I get so lost.
What were you saying, Carson?
I just get lost, and he packs so much in. It's hard to keep, and because we've just been talking about this over the course of 2 years.
Yeah,
like,
it's been a while. Yeah, Briarrose is he's a black African. They show him prior to the thing, and there's this weird thing where there's I think like a John Woo produced CG animated Appleseed movie where they bring Briarrose back and completely ignored the Shiro source material, and they make him like a very pretty Asian man. Because I feel like one of the ways that Shiro, and we might have talked about this in book one of the ways that Shiro shows America is, aside from Diunan and her father, I think there's always like black Americans around. Yeah, and Briarrose is, it's interesting because culturally he doesn't seem very Russian, but who knows? He's been through a lot.
He's Russian? He's a Russian Black American?
If I remember, yeah, if I remember, he grew up in Russia, and then there's a bio page I should have read before, but yeah, he grew up in Russia, and then knew Dionan's father, and there's always this. The interesting thing about Appleseed is the relationship between Dionan and Briarrose is kind of unsaid. And I remember once there's a French artist named Trinket that did a pinup of Dionan and Briarrose, and it just had English in it that said, "Do they sleep together?"
Well, she's definitely hot for him, because she'll get hot for other like robots and think about him.
Sure.
So
Well, yeah, we kind of got into a little bit of that. My pet theory is that she's had a real rough life, and that having somebody near her who they might be physically incapable of doing things might be a very convenient,
yeah.
Just
I want to point out that Shiro, I believe, has made it specific that Briarrose has a penis.
Well, there you go.
I don't want us to forget who we're dealing with here.
I ain't gonna argue with the Shiro footnote, because if I do, there's gonna be another one that's like 5 times longer.
Yeah, but then there's also the thing of like, they do have a complicated weird relationship, because my understanding is Briarrose is like essentially around when Dionan was growing up, so for him that might just be like a clear-cut boundary.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But he doesn't really go into that, so we never know.
Which is the only series that he's ever made that this would not be, front and center at some point.
Made explicit.
It says something really interesting about his storytelling style, that you can fill out this entire world and we're dealing with these larger problems and everything, but we don't even know what the main two characters who spend all the time with sexual relationship is or isn't.
Yeah, and he does like to be very explicit. Like, I started reading Ghost in the Shell, and I was thinking, oh, we should do those after we finish this. And I got into it. And I'm like, I can't, because that one has so many notes in it, and it's like, this isn't even a comic. He's just speculating.
Well, we're about to head into a section here that I would like to call Chekhov's gun platform.
Okay. Yes. Well, before we flip to the book, Brandon has this in the floppy format and was going to show us some sexy covers here.
Yeah, these were put out by Eclipse.
So Arthur Adams did these beautiful covers in the Eclipse edition.
Wow.
If I
remember right, there's a story where he came in and specifically, like, because he was a big Marvel guy around this time.
Right.
Yeah.
But clearly very manga influence. And I remember hearing the stories where he specifically came in and was like, I want to do these covers, which I think he's a perfect fit for it.
Yeah.
The coloring is great.
They were in a weird spot editorially, because they had been picked up as a monthly magazine. But of course, these and not Appleseed Volume 1 and 2 weren't actually serialized. Mm-hmm. They came out, or they were, put out as single volumes, which is a fairly unusual move in the first place. But Shiro was young and didn't want to hop on the treadmill, which, good for him, because we see what happens when he actually went ahead and serialized Appleseed Volume 5. He couldn't finish it because he got so dissatisfied with not having it be the way that he wanted it to be. But yeah, anyway, they since it wasn't serialized in the first place, they were going to put it out, but they didn't have any covers. All they had was the trade covers and a few pinups that he had done. So this was a kind of common problem with early manga publishers. And a publisher like Viz usually just had the production staff strip out the screen tone, and then somebody would hand color, a single frame or whatever. But I don't think that would really work with the Shiro aesthetic very well.
No.
Yeah, so it was Arthur Adams for the second book, and then the third book they brought in Adam Warren, which were pretty fantastic covers too.
I'm surprised that Shiro let other people. He seems so like fine-tuned about everything. It's surprising that he would agree to that if he was already having some kind of control over how the book was released.
At the time, I think that they just saw it. I mean, a lot of the publishers anyway just saw it as like this weird fantasy land that it would even be published in English. You kind of had two responses. Some of the artists thought that it was going to be like a lucrative market, but they were like very small comparison to the ones that were just like, well, whatever. You know, you don't put it on toilet paper. You want to print it what, mirrored? You know, like
Yeah, my
Yeah, that
understanding
makes
was
sense.
that Shiro was even less hands-on than a lot of, because I know the Blade of the Immortal guy, he didn't want his art to be flipped, so they actually had to
right.
rearrange panels when
Hmm.
translating it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and that was a common complaint, especially like some of the, well, the other one that was really big, was super irritated about that was the guy that did Outlanders, Manabe.
Oh, Joji Manabe.
Yeah, he apparently saw his stuff reversed for the first time and just thought he was going to throw up or something. Like he was so excited. He's like, "Oh, my drawing is terrible."
That is a
yeah,
cool trick though, like because looking stuff backwards really lets you know what you got wrong.
Yeah, I was working on a painting commission. I hope these people don't watch the channel. And husband and wife, and I painted it really quickly, and I just stared at it, and I could not figure out why this guy looked cross-eyed. And it took flipping it and looking it in the mirror, and finally figuring out why he looked cross-eyed, as the highlight was in the wrong place, and I blacked out the highlight and moved his eye, moved the highlight only. But I wouldn't have figured it out without a mirror. I probably would have had to just put it away for like a couple hours or a couple days.
yeah, and you were sending it to me, and I was like, I don't know, it looks all right to me. Like, so I wasn't seeing it in the phone at least.
Yeah,
But anyways, you
yeah,
want to go ahead and get to the book? So we left off halfway through the hide and seek, and at this point in the story, we basically just spent the majority of the book setting up the philosophical argument, Sean, that you were talking about. And they've put into the computer, they left off saying, well, we can't make a decision about the bioroids idea to basically start turning humans into bioroids is my takeaway.
right.
That's like how they're going to solve the problem of humans not being able to be ever satisfied. And they said, well, we got to take a break before we can do this, and we're going to ask the computer to tell us what human is. And so they go to the main AI that controls the human portion of the utopian city they're in, and they ask it to give them a definition of human, and it's just having a problem formulating that definition. And it starts talking to the AI that runs the bioroid portion of the city, is my understanding of what was going on, correct?
Right.
Okay,
Yep.
so that's where we're at, is that now these two things have been talking to each other, and that's going to start causing problems.
Yeah. The computer technician, looks like they finally stopped gabbing together. Shall I issue my conclusions?
Yeah, and then about time, and then it's not a good conclusion.
Right. Gaia's CPU is overheating. What are you doing over there? Take care. It should cool down in a minute.
And in the
Like,
meanwhile,
should I give
they've
you my
also
conclusion and then it just explodes.
Right.
and in the meanwhile, they've taken the bioroid council, and they're kind of holding them hostage. They're holding them guard, and they want to consult with their AI, but they're not allowed to. So that's what's going on here. And then at this point in the story, I feel like I was kind of on board with where he was trying to go with it. I still don't understand exactly what the bioroids are, like how they're different than humans. If one of you can explain that, I would be thrilled.
Well, I think there's my understanding is they're essentially, they like you're saying earlier, that they're humans that are sanded down. They have
Right.
life extension, and kind of they have to kind of re-up it fairly regularly, and they kind of stay young longer, and are less aggressive and less kind of prone to the self-destructive aspects that humans have.
And come from a selected stock. They don't really get into like the nitty gritty of like what they're, they have origins in a limited amount of real people, like genetic origins.
It's the best of the best.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
the thing that trips me up though is he's kind of positing it as like bioroids don't have conflict and humans have conflict, and so we need to make the humans more like bioroids to get over their warlike nature. But then the bioroids are obviously having conflict about what to do about the humans. So
Well, but that's by definition a human problem. I mean, that's, the one cynical way of looking at that is that the humans are the problem in that case. The humans are the ones that are causing the problem. If they weren't there, there'd be no need to be disruptive with each other.
Okay. So that's, yeah. I don't know. It just makes them seem human to me, though, where I can't distinguish them. But
I think
anyways, that's
it's one of the things that make this feel so fresh is the fact that, you know, the conflict. You and I talked about this a lot, Carson. That a lot of the major social conflicts right now are not political social conflicts. They're conflicts between the rights of the individual and rights of the society. You can
yeah.
imagine extending that out over time and seeing the rights of society gradually becoming society itself being homogenized.
Well, and that's this book, like going back and really trying to think my way through it. He is grappling and he is grappling with the fact that AI is involved too. Like this book feels like the argument that we're in right now.
Right.
And him trying to solve the problem that we're in right now. I just don't get what his proposition is.
Well, let's find out.
Yeah, let's find out. But really like this sequence here, just the art, the effects on this, where basically it's playing music. Gaia is playing music to them and hypnotizing the scientists that work with it to go do its duty for them.
Right.
Like it needs hands.
I love that guy's face all distorted in the long panel there at the top.
Yeah, this is amazing.
Stretched out across. Also, you hardly ever see him really go for the black usage there. So seeing a little bit of Kirby Crackle there on the screen and everything.
Yeah. But I just thought that idea of like hypnotizing the music is so ahead of its time too, because of like binaural audio and e-dosing and all these kind of things that were like started to get popular in like 2010, where you could like listen to certain binaural audio beats and feel high or whatever. That the computer could like neuro hack with noise is just like so prescient of him, and probably something that we will start encountering more of.
There's actually a Kate Bush song on that exact topic that probably would have came out the same year as Appleseed Volume 2. I forgot what it's called, Experiment something or other, but the chorus of the song is something about looking for a sound that would kill someone from a distance. So we go ahead, and then the whole song is about like manipulating people with harsh sound. You know, at the height of the heavy metal era, she writes this. So yeah, they've been manipulated away from their stations. I love the little mobile they have above their desk there.
Oh yeah, and did you notice there's an untranslated Japanese post-it note on the third panel?
There it is.
Well, and most of the stuff in here was written in English to begin with, correct? Because he's setting it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice.
And then we get these amazing big spider.
It says wisdom too.
Yeah, with the most boring name. Aren't they called like gun platforms or something?
Yeah, gun platforms, right. Chekhov's gun platform here. So we're getting a little you guys have been staring at those screens too long, man. You'll all look wiped. So they go in and they're checking out very suspiciously, checking out the defense here. How's that looking, guys? Please reload with live ammunition. Are you kidding? For the inaugural salute, we must retest the linear attitude dampers. So this is in preparation for a parade that's going to happen tomorrow. And these hypnotized guys have gone in and seen Chekhov's gun platform. And as we all know from Chekhov, they are going to go off.
And then we break.
Gun platform, it has to go off.
Right, exactly.
And then we come to break Briar Rose out of the hospital, I believe is what's going on here. And here she is in love with him.
Oh yeah. They have the great like weird 3D television that they're watching, all the cyborgs.
But they have to have like special, oh no, those are just their natural glasses.
Yeah, that guy's just a cool dude.
But this is actually like how a hologram works. Like you can see it projecting from the 4 different sides to form it.
Yeah, he's being lit from himself. It looks like he's got like a shadow behind him. That's who's popping out. That's cool. What the hatching there on the background there? That's like the most Otomo hatching that we've seen so far.
Oh yeah.
Behind Briar Rose there as he's turning around to look at the nurse in an action sequence. fashion.
That is cool. It's like two sets of action lines
Mm-hmm.
related. I guess Adam Warren did that a lot, but he probably got it from Shirow.
Right. Yeah, a lot.
And then
of
they
people
all
got
hide.
nothing
They're scared
from
of the
Shirow.
nurse. But I didn't take much away from this. I think they're just breaking him out. And then this FBI guy comes in. And
There's a weird
like,
gay joke in it.
where's that at?
It's just when they all hide from the nurse and the doctor hides in Briar Rose's bed, and Dunan is like kind of acts like she's caught them having an affair.
Oh, I
And
was
then
wondering
immediately
who
it's just
this
like,
guy
I'm just
is the
kidding.
whole time.
Oh, it's the pervy doctor guy. He's the same guy who's you know, every time he shows up, he's got something. He's a little bit too much of attention to Briar Rose, I think. He's got
Oh,
this
okay.
sort of, you know, he wants to make sure he functions right. You know,
Yeah, he does.
he's always got a bottle of oil at the ready to make sure his blinking is.
We'll get right on the erotic fan comic of the scene.
So here's I think another statement of the dilemma that Shirow thinks he's solving is, seems our species has just two options left: pursue our every desire and thereby drag the whole world down to destruction, or change our very nature and preserve the present sterile utopia in stasis forever. And so that's like, when I'm reading it, I'm thinking, okay, what's his third solution to this? Because they say right here that's too simplistic, and he's trying to show that there's something more simplistic. And then there's this really weird like panel here where they're all of a sudden in nature, and I was wondering if that's like supposed to be a metaphoric background there, where they're like predicting the world that we could be living in.
Interesting. I assumed it was just she hid her Gubes robot in the bushes outside.
Right.
Oh, they've moved outside now?
Yeah, not to backtrack too much, but there's a panel a couple pages earlier where it shows a knocked out doctor when the guy kind of breaks in the hospital to find Briar Rose. And that's a doctor that earlier in the same book, Briar Rose points out that he has a gun. And he's telling Dunan that like things are more dangerous than they look. So not quite a Chekhov's gun, but a guy that he's like, that guy has a gun concealed. And then you see him holding his gun knocked out.
Right here. Okay. I think sometimes Shirow makes too big a jumps for me, or like you'll have to, remember these things from too far in the past. And his stories are already so dense that it's easy for me to lose that stuff. So here, like, I don't assume that these characters have moved outside. I've just, I guess he's changed clothes too.
Yeah,
okay.
we've got a couple hours worth of time has shifted. They're just having the conversation as they're doing shit. I think she's parking her robot and hiding it underneath the foliage.
Yeah, and he doesn't because the conversation still just continues from them being in the hospital, but then he does this kind of scratchy word balloon thing to kind of imply that it's almost like a voiceover.
It's like the ice cream conversation from the park.
Yeah.
They approach
his time fuckery throws me off. Okay, I get it now. I thought they were talking. Someone imagine then we're back in the hospital. Okay, I got it.
I think this is actually very similar to, like, this is essentially his workaround for not having footnotes like he does later. So like later he's willing to just be like, well, look, I'm the guy. Everybody loves me. I'm going to have a third of this page be a footnote about this, right?
Yeah.
Here he just goes ahead and has the action continue and the things that he's necessary to get to the plot while he has the characters give you the footnote instead.
Yeah, the footnotes always felt very insecure to me. Like in this early stuff, he feels more confident. And then later on, he's like, it's almost like he got too much shit from people. And he was like, let me make sure I mention that I know this is not exactly how this gun would work, just so I don't get a letter to the publisher.
I think it's a real kind of like, you're right. It's a kind of weakness. Like it's a kind of reveal of weakness. I feel I just started reading for the first time the entirety of Paying for It, the Chester Brown book. And I immediately felt the same thing. It's like defensive footnote city attached to like a fairly intense, comic narrative. I
imagine Chester Brown was probably very paranoid going into Paying for It, being like, people are going to, my book about sleeping with prostitutes might not go. And I wonder how he feels about it now, because I feel like it didn't go over well.
I mean, fair enough to be worried about that book, but I like that book quite a bit.
No, it's a good. It has. I mean, there's things in it. We should do another thing about
Yeah.
that.
Totally.
Yeah.
This is a trick
Actually,
from mid Appleseed book. We started a Chester Brown review.
Yeah.
You know?
Started in Appleseed. This was another sequence where I almost felt like these pages should be reversed, because Dunan's like all in this suit here and they're outside this big thing, and then they walk in here and she's not in the suit, and then we turn the page and they're all in suits again, rappelling off the side of this big thing. And but this is like also just telling us where they're at. But I really feel like this is them meeting the group, and then this is them getting ready to jump over the side of the building.
I think you're right. Yeah.
I feel like these pages got printed out of order. Is that in your physical copy, Brandon?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's a purposeful thing where he's basically maybe it's just like a pacing thing, because the only point of the page on the left is basically like Dunan feels insecure because she made a friend in Olympus she couldn't trust, and it's reminding her of this.
Right.
And then this is the memory of that, and then we're back to the action.
I guess so, yeah. And then we get to see CODIS, the weird robot with his face off, which is
right. He takes it off.
Horrible.
The guys are horrified. Jeez, who taught him how to do that?
I
like his little barcode.
Oh yeah, he always speaks in barcodes. It'd be interesting. I know he just hand draws it, but it always makes me think of, do you remember the game in the 80s or 90s where you could scan barcodes and it gave you like a power set for your little robot?
Yeah.
And there was like a noodle brand or something that just went nuts one time because people were like, it's the ultimate. Yeah.
Well, you can imagine if he had QR codes available, he totally would have like hand drawn a QR code in there that you could scan, and like you could totally see that happening.
Yeah, my friend Wyatt, for his book Bolero that I lettered, he actually did that, where there's billboards he did in a couple issues where you can hold your phone up to it and scan it, and it brings you to a playlist.
Oh, that's awesome. I know people have used it, but I could totally see Shirow doing something like that. I wonder if there is back then something you could scan that with that would go somewhere.
My volume doesn't have that balloon, by the way.
Action scene I really like here. They hit this guy with like a sleep dart, and then the guy in the suit comes down and catches him with his feet so he doesn't hit the floor.
Mm-hmm.
His panel to panel work and the action sequences is just so much better than the first one.
And I love his posters he has in the background, like his Watch It poster that's like is it an anti-smoking ad, but the guy's a gun?
It looks like it. Yeah.
Like, don't blow yourself up accidentally.
Yeah, and I feel like the guy with the mustache has shown up before.
This guy?
Yeah, is that one of the guys that it's not one of the guys that's, I don't know.
I'm thinking of in the first book when Briarrose is shot and the neighbor is like, they're like, call the police, and the guy's like, or he says like, call a hospital, and he's like, hospital's not going to come when you call, just being a dick.
Yeah, that's why I feel like I could read this stuff kind of front to back like 4 times in a row, and then I would feel like I had a better grip on it, like all 4 volumes front to back, like once a day for 4 days is what I need to really get all of the interrelations, or at least start to get a grip on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's right now, my hope with all of us doing this now is like I've been reading these since I was a teenager, and I'm like, we're gonna figure this out
finally. So anyways, they're going in to get Hitomi because they need her DNA or something to get into the Gaia mainframe. Is that correct?
Yes. That is correct. And of note, Hitomi and her boyfriend there have number 9s on in the unflipped one, and somebody just whited those out rather than having to letter them in the reversed one.
Oh,
cool.
So
thanks,
it
guys.
actually looks better. The 9 is kind of weirdly distracting, but
and then we get the big like scene basically where all the shit starts to go down between, like, Gaia has decided basically that she needs to kill the AI that is the human AI that watches over the humans, has decided that the Bioids are going to start altering humans against their will, and so she needs to attack Tartarus, which is the Bioid city, and lets these gun things loose to go get them, but in the process starts killing a bunch of humans as well.
Such a good spread. On the previous spread, there is an actual cameo from the character from his Dominion series.
Oh, I never noticed that.
The chapter 11 Zero Hour, there's the screen tone girl is the green girl, I believe, from
this
yeah,
this character here.
Oh, yeah.
She definitely looks out of place.
Because both her and the guy above her look like characters from Dominion.
Which is a very interesting series, by the way.
I haven't read that one yet. I need to get it.
It's a heavily polluted world, and all the police use tanks in it.
Yeah. It reminds me of Brevard, Florida.
So, Sean, I wanted to point out, and because I know he does work over big spans of time, you had talked about when we were in volume 1, how you liked how he threw kids in casually, and that he had kids in there not just as a symbol of like vulnerability. And actually, I think he is still using them as a symbol of vulnerability, because when these things get let loose, you have this kid crying, "Wow, mommy." And he's reminding you that this is a city populated with kids and family. And now that all of this like chaos starts getting let loose, like those are the stakes. And I would never have noticed that if you hadn't made the comment about how casually he'll just have kids walking across a crosswalk. And I think long term he did still use them as symbols of vulnerability.
Yeah, that's a good call. And in this particular chapter, as the action starts coming back, we see callbacks to basically everything that we picked out as a feature of his city building. We talked about the cities that he stole from the experimental Italian artist architect guy. Thank you, anonymous commenter who brought our attention to that.
And he calls them arcologies in here, which is the name of that book. Yeah,
I didn't mean that as a shot when I say stole. I mean influenced by another genius. He brings in all of the other sort of features, including like things like the movable solar panels. Which we see them sort of shifting in order to get light for the power that they're taking on right now, as everything gets controlled simultaneously. The kid who's playing at his thing, and he's like, "Mommy, the teacher told me to stop doing my lesson, and I can just play with the home system." So like he's being communicated with. The electronic teacher is like basically like, "Hey kid, use your own power."
Well, and I noted that like the kid is I thought that was interesting, that the kid is at home doing remote school learning, and the suggestion is that the teacher is an AI, which is kind of where we're at risk of heading. And it even has like this can or trash can or something in the back that says home is best studies. And I thought that was a really interesting, smart prediction of where things are headed post COVID, with all the remote learning and with AI becoming something that seems more like it could actually become a teaching tool now. This very well could be what we're looking at.
That sounds like the start of a horror movie.
Yeah, but I mean,
in the end of a horror movie.
But that's what this book is. That's what this book is suggesting, though, is that this AI is running the whole city. And now it's chosen that to protect the humans, which is its job, it's going to go at war with Tartarus, which is the other art. And they call it not a city, they call it an arcology. And I don't know what that means, but
those fantastic explosions there. I mean,
yeah, I feel like he's really choosing his battles on where he puts details to. Like there's the page with all of the incredibly detailed cityscapes, and then when he draws the spider gun platforms, they're just much more cartoony, because he's like, I gave you your detail.
Well, and they look more monstrous because of it. They don't look like tech so much as these big, awful, like creepy spider things.
It probably makes them look like they're moving more when they're scratchier.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sort of like mild wraparound hatching to the bottom, whereas most of it's filled into black. It's a really you know, nice, efficient strategy compared to his normal.
Yeah, like can you notice the guy with he's got an Appleseed, is it like a button or something on his shirt?
Patch, yeah. And I do like that this builds up to an explanation for the name of the series too in this story.
Right.
Yeah. Which is you know, further evidence, I think, that he's really shooting off everything that he's got in this volume.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that, you know, he talked for a long time about this being like his life work and he was going to keep on extending it and all these things. I think that really this is where he's like, okay, this is what I got.
Yeah, because having read volume 3 and 4, they just seem more like action stories. This seems like the main philosophical conflict that he was struggling with is in this volume. But I really like how he handles, because I can get lost in his work still. I do think in this sequence, he does a pretty good job of cycling me between the kind of different people at different parts in the city that are having different goals. You know, trying to get to different things and turn different things off and turn different things on. And I was able to follow that all very clearly.
Right. Is that Mr. Spock?
Where?
In the car on the right side of the page you were just on?
This one?
Yeah, the middle panel on the right.
Oh yeah, right there. He is. That is.
Oh, something I wanted to point out, the issues I have sometimes have interviews in the back of them. And when he was interviewed in these, he was working on book 4, and he talks a lot about how he has plans for Appleseed that he doesn't want to ruin. And I wonder if those just went away, or if he had plans that he didn't reach, or he did bring it to fruition and we just couldn't tell because it's so dense and weird.
It was just going to be ladies having sex with robots.
Finally, he's like, ghost in the shell. Let's work this out.
I really think that you know, based on his behavior about all the stuff that he created for Volume 5, and how he wouldn't allow it to be collected for, I mean, it was like a decade and a half, 2 decades after he made it. I think that something about the process of actually serializing something was deeply disturbing to him, that it was out there and he couldn't like revise it or go back to it or whatever, that it was like locked in to the time frame he was working on it. There's an interview he gave right after that, and he seems really anxious, and he talks about the earthquake you know, destroying his studio, and he's got such anxiety. He seems to have such anxiety about it, and that was timed with all this stuff, you know, that this was his first time serializing something, the first time it being like essentially created in public, rather than being able to revise it as much as you want in roughs before you do it, you know.
Yeah, well, there's something to be said about the kind of person, you know, and speaking about all of us, is the kind of person that gets into comics and is such of an indoor kid that they learn to draw and spend that much focus on it. And then any of us that then, like, now you're essentially a public figure through your alone in your room work. It puts everyone in a really weird position where you're like, my entire childhood was built for me to build my own worlds, and now I have to, and now other people are also in my world. This is terrifying, you know?
Right. And they get to like shape it like with their feedback.
Yeah, and just tell here, like be like, this is my life's work, and someone reading it and being like, you're wrong, you got this part wrong.
Yeah.
Well, and not only that, but this life's work is him trying to solve the biggest problem that has always faced mankind, and then he's extrapolating it very successfully into what that's going to be when technology pushes the oldest human problem to its peak. And like, that's his life work. And he's like, what a task to take on. Like, how could you not be anxious and burn out? And then if you feel like people aren't getting the answer that you're giving them, you're like, I'm giving you the solution and you're not seeing it. And, you know, like, no wonder he just draws like schlocky Photoshop porn now. Like, what else are you going to do?
Yeah, he flew too close to the sun.
Yeah, like, fuck it, man. I don't have any more energy. Just naked girls. I did not like this part here. They're like, well, this isn't a comic book, you know. I'm not a fan of that kind of, it's not fourth wall breaking, but it's like, but it is a comic book. And like, why did you remind me of that?
Oh, they just point out specifically. I wonder how much that's the translator and not the
Yeah.
source material.
I would hope the translator didn't do him that dirty.
This whole sequence is amazing. I have to say, the gun platform design is, I think, super successful, and you can definitely see his interest in. I almost said etymology. What is it called when somebody likes insects?
Entomology.
Entomology. Thank you.
Entomology. I'm sure he's into etymology as well, because that seems like the type of nerdy thing that he would like.
Speaking of etymology, do you guys know what Tartarus is?
No, I was curious about that because gay. Oh, actually, no, that's hell, right?
Yeah, well, he's the dark and gloomy part of the realm of Hades, reserved for the damned and the wicked.
Yeah,
such
and
as the Titans.
That's the Bioids, yeah, versus
Yeah.
Gaia, which is Earth, Mother
Right.
Earth, yeah,
Exactly.
and that's for the humans.
It's a very interesting, loaded. I mean, reserved for the Titans, though. So familiarity with the Titans, like essentially like proto-humans that are not like gods. I mean, are just as closer to gods than people. So this is sort of backhanded negative. It's not just negative, I think.
There's a really interesting sequence on the previous scene where Hitomi actually gets into the computer and they scan her eyes. There's
Right.
one panel that I really like that's showing these two lining up images of her basically having to look as like it's two overlaid things that show that she's got to line up her eyes with the thing.
Yeah, and they're looking for a false like retinal membrane, so that someone put like a fake eye on, basically.
Right.
But yeah, that's like the computer seeing both of her eyes right there, which is that is a cool little effect.
Yeah, it's a very HAL 9000 computer too.
And then like a really accurate drawing of what would happen if you shone a light in an eye. So this big cluster right here would cause your blind spot. That's a nerve or blood vessel cluster in your eye that's like off to the side of the eye in your periphery that causes a blind spot that your brain's always filling in. So he's got the anatomy of the eye correct there.
Just think about the insane amount of things that this gentleman had to know about in order to create this particular fictional world. Every time I look at one of those suits, I just about have a conniption fit trying to imagine drawing it from panel to panel, let alone designing it from the ground up. It's just insane.
How old was he when he was doing this stuff?
I mean, I think he was still in his like mid or late 20s.
Yeah, so to have read that much about technology, to have formulated all of these thoughts so clearly, and that much about science and engineering and mechanics to do all of this, right? It's astonishing like what that dude must have consumed before starting any of these stories. They were obviously in his head like this, and Ghost in the Shell and all that's kind of in there all concurrently, jostling for attention. It seems like it's pretty, you see why he get overwhelmed.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these books he did very close together. Like I remember looking at a thing like Orion and Dominion and Appleseed. I think all was done within a span of a decade or 5 years even.
Yeah, no, it's like five or 6 years.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
His debut, Doshinji debut, Black Magic, I think is in '84. But then like a year and a half later, he's drawing Appleseed Volume 1. So it's nutty. And yeah, he was done with the really active period by like 93 or something. I mean, so you're talking about a span of like 8 years, 9 years where the stuff that we really are talking about as being critical was all done.
Yeah, and the amount of knowledge that's behind all of that is insane. So here we get, Sean, maybe you can help me with this, but here we get where they're kind of arguing about what I think is him trying to talk about the solution, but now you have the Bioids, I'm assuming, because you've got Athena there, and they're talking about like you can't have a computer do anything that the programmers didn't intend for it to do in the first place, which we're finding out it's not true.
Right.
When you have neural network AI, it will do whatever the hell it wants. But I think he's aware of that, and he's showing that Gaia like can go past the programmers. It can kind of make decisions.
I like her response here when he tells you that too. He says, "You don't have to explain the difference between a pencil and a finger to me."
Yeah, the fingers that
that's
hold
an amazing line.
Yeah.
He's got some pithy, absolutely pithy one-liners. The pencil difference between a pencil and a finger.
Yeah,
Which
I guess
is,
specifically a pencil and the fingers that hold it. Like,
Right.
and for a guy who does
Really-
extensive notes, it's nice that he can do pith.
Right.
But then she says the problem is how we deal with stress. Is this utopia we have now the way things should be, or the opposite? So it's like we try to avoid stress, but maybe we need to let stress in.
Yes.
So he's reformulating his argument there.
Uh-huh.
And then she says, hopes versus realities. Is it Gaia solved the problem with third generation bioroids? And like, it seems like Gaia is just trying to eliminate the bioroids. So I'm not sure what he's suggesting that they're trying to do and what exactly a third generation bioroid would be.
Yeah, well, it says on the next page, what's this here? This design philosophy was adopted in third generation and certain selected bioroid units. These units have not encountered stress problems. Is it talking about the council? It may be one way to close the gap between expectations and reality, but it's not the kind of thing a computer would come up with on its own. Amazing, this problem never surfaced before. So Tartarus predicted the council's actions and even the kind of plan they would come up with. Then it must have known there were enough votes in the legislature to pass it. So then we're back onto politics. But yeah, essentially what they're saying is that the people that the council themselves are made up of this third generation, this separate stock that don't respond to stressors in the same kind of way. They definitely seem like different than, you know, the
So
other
she's
citizens.
realizing then that the two AI have been planning war through their populations. Like
Right.
so the AI knew, the Tartarus AI knew what their citizen would decide and was preparing to use that against the human Gaia AI. And so these people are just stuck in a battle of these bigger kind of corporate consciousness. Is that kind of what is being suggested here?
I mean, that's my understanding of it.
Okay. And then she says, have we reached our limits, both bioroids and humans? Can't we ever return to Eden? And I don't know. That's it.
Very
I think
interesting.
Sean's going to suggest that we should. Also wanted to point out on this page that for Hitomi to prove her genetics, they took her blood and then did an anal probe. They gave her an endoscope. So to
Well,
break into the building, she had to keister a camera or something.
well,
Not just have her eyes scanned.
wait, hold on. You can't get an endoscopy through your throat. Isn't that what that?
Is it? No, isn't it an endoscope through the ass?
No. Endoscopy is through the throat.
Oh, colonoscopy is through the ass. Okay, so
Colonoscopy,
she
yeah.
had to like suck this thing down her throat then?
Right.
I like your wishful thinking, Carson.
I don't know. It said it's in the end, you know, it goes in the end.
Right.
Not in
Endo.
the
Yeah,
Yeah.
in the end. Yeah, I get it.
Okay, well then I've had an endoscopy.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, we both did in the last year.
Although I was sedated and passed out, so it's possible my anus was also involved.
I can only hope.
Only hope that while I was out.
If it was the case, they were very gentle and never saw the
You
footage.
awoke with a single rose resting on your chest.
there was no evidence of foul play. So at this point, Gaia starts using all of its mirrors, and I think they refer to it as her, right? I think Gaia is feminized.
Right.
Starts using her mirrors to create a gigantic, basically like sun laser beam, and it's going to blow up the weapons. Like there's like a magnifying glass with an ant creating this heat wave that's going to blow up the city and the heat waves and the opposing arcology, which is Tartarus.
The artwork in this sequence is so good, and he doesn't play with line weight very much. But look at that unit on the bottom there. It you know, he saves it for the close up there, and also, you know, he's pumping some more black in there. But like it's interesting. Like some of the sequences earlier, it really does have that kind of Otomo thing where there's a little bit of variation in the figures, but it's like not quite a deadline, but it's like an accumulation of like mid-sized lines, and it can feel kind of overwhelming sometimes, especially when you see like a cityscape or something like that, and they've all kind of
Hmm.
got that uh, mid value or mid weight, you know. But it's nice when he gets a just slightly juicier with some of the stuff. It
Oh yeah,
gives
like
it,
Very good.
the line on the curve of her face. That's
yeah.
what you mean. And
Yeah.
for some reason in this look through, I'm really enamored with how he's drawing eyebrows. They're very
Yeah.
stylized.
Oh yeah, super
And the way
stylized.
he leaves them empty a lot of the time
Mhm.
is cool. So the reason it's using the mirrors is because when Hitomi does get the the endoscopy, that effectively shuts down its weapon systems, and the only thing it has control of anymore is the mirrors. So
Right, that's a
that's how
weird.
the AI.
Go back a page. There's a really weird Dyunan mouth on that looks like it's almost taken from an animation technique. As if an animator is moving a mouth and they don't want to have to show the lips moving, they would move it to that position so you can just. And so it's interesting that he's doing it in a manga.
Yeah, he's still
Picasso.
definitely in animation mode for a lot of the designs. One of the things we talked about before is that his designs, like half the characters, are definitely animation inspired. That's interesting that you're seeing that.
Which is also stranger because I feel like Appleseed has never been. It's been animated multiple times, all very unsuccessfully.
I like the one that's an adaptation of this volume. I don't think it's, you know, as smart obviously as the comic,
Sure,
but the action sequences are pretty good. At least my
that's
memory.
definitely the closest one. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine animating this.
Well,
I don't know, maybe it'd read smoother because he really seems to intentionally let the action be kind of confusing. That was something that took a while for me to get a grip on with him, is that you feel like you're in there kind of lost in the way you would if you were in a gun battle. Like you're kind of whipping around corners and stuff, and it takes me a while to get a hang on some of his action sequences. It's smoother in this book. But here they are, they're at the heart of the AI, the
I,
brain, I guess.
I also I really enjoy the visionary aspect of having the AI fight with the solar panels. I think that really gets to some of the stuff. People don't seem to have sufficiently freaked out, by the way, over the past month as these things have developed. I don't think that people have really thought about what it's going to mean when each of these types of systems are connected to each other. But he gives a pretty good illustration of it here. Like, so you have this service computer that should theoretically only be in charge of, you know, it doesn't have munitions that it's in charge of, right? And yet somehow it's able to get these gun platforms to go shoot everybody, and it's able to adjust solar panels to fire heat. You know, we're going to have similar kinds of things once you have these systems be integrated. If a thing can program, it can write spam emails and put in links to get people, you know, stripped of their authorizations for their accounts. You know, there are all these sort of soft approaches that an intelligence that is removed from physicality can still take to
Well,
menace
and he
or eliminate
talks
threats.
about it on the next page, and it actually links exactly to that article that Luciano wrote that I just sent you. That, like, this is again like how far ahead Shiro is that like the world's leading AI philosophy of information ethics guy just wrote an article in response to ChatGPT, basically saying what Shiro says right here. Gaia has no desires. Gaia has only conclusions. And Luciano's article was talking about AI is agency without intelligence.
Mm.
And that's exactly what it is. It can come to conclusions and act upon them, but it has no desires. It has no like it's not self-aware as far as we can tell. It's just something that can compute logic. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, we're like reversing evolution now. We're like evolution built upon the ability to move and like lizard brain, and then you get to like prefrontal cortex kind of like hard logic and the ability to do art and the ability to write and all these things that we think are superhuman. And what's the first things that the AI are doing? They're like successfully making art and successfully writing. And what they can't do yet is like navigate the world. And so we're starting with like all of the part of our brain
High
that
level.
has no emotions, it has none of that. it has no intelligence, no self-awareness, but it has conclusions and agency. And the fact that he nails that in one of his pithy lines in, when was this book made? Early 90s?
No, 80s. This is
80s?
87.
I mean, so
Yeah,
like 35 some odd years ago,
it's just
more
insane.
like 40 some odd years
It,
ago.
it's worth reading almost everything that's happening on this page too. Like, yeah, they're, you know, in the conflict here, but relying on machines and logic alone has its fault too. If it really is Bioids who are dangerous, or is it actually you we should be worried about, Gaia? Okay, all clear. We'll take the next door. If we stop Gaia now, there'll be no more checks and balances on the Bioids. But if we don't, we'll be back to the pre-war days again. Argus says there's a third road, but I don't have a clue what it might be. And that's when she sees that fucking CODIS.
Well,
It's
and
such a cool panel sequence too.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you see the see-through you know, Dionan's head motion being rendered at 2 angles there. I really like that.
and this feels a lot like those Andy Warhol Elvis
Yeah,
ones where he overlays the Elvis. I immediately, like, I don't know if he's referencing that, but
Yeah, I don't think I've seen this technique to show slow motion before, but it works really well. Like,
it's
really makes you
awesome.
feel like time is like this is a slow motion.
and like the
It
way the
reminds me of
legs
the thing I think
overlap.
of is like the Daredevil effect, where you show him like leaping and draw
Right.
multiple versions of a person moving in a panel.
Yeah.
But that one's almost the opposite effect of like things going really fast, where this is just slow.
Yeah, time wormy. I think Sean up here too. Gaia says factoring in variations in inclination, educational bias, etc., etc. Gaia discusses data amongst individual computer units. Conclusions equal proposals, and it has that very like cold analytical, like just processing information with agency in it. And I do think this is setting up like, okay, we've got humans which are more emotion based, but have some logical capabilities. And then you have the Bioids, which are more logic and reason based, but they obviously still have some humanity left in them. And then he's comparing that to the AI, which is entirely logic with no emotion. And he's presenting that as, again, like this binary, where, you know, a dilemma, but there may be a third road. I'm still not sure what it is. And then there's a conflict a few pages later where here you get basically Dunan has to decide whether she's actually going to explode the AI or not.
I mean, I was
And
wondering
this,
in that last sequence, in the fight sequence, CODIS mask is knocked off, his face is knocked off.
She
And
shoots
there's
his
2
face off.
sequences before that where he takes off his mask on purpose. And I wonder if Shirow was almost worried that people would like recognize it was the same robot when he knocks the thing off, and wanted to make sure that you knew that this is what he looks like under his faceplate.
That's a
oh,
good
and
call.
it comes back on.
Well, he puts it on. He takes it off earlier to just sort of show off, and the guys are all horrified by it. But she shoots it off right here.
Yeah, and there's another sequence too where he just is taking it off in the back of a panel. It almost feels like the rule of threes in comedy, you know?
right.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's training you, right? He's training you to recognize that
Right.
guy. Yeah.
And then
I wonder if it takes 3 times for something to land with an audience.
Yeah, and when Briar Rose finally like kills CODIS, I was always kind of confused by that sequence when he like throws him and he explodes, if he's using his hand as like a gun or something.
Here?
Oh, on the next page,
yeah.
or even farther than that. Also, it's a great sequence where just Yunan's headpiece is knocked off. Like, things are going so fast that she loses that and just has bleeding from the forehead.
Oh yeah, he's shooting there because there's bullets coming out of his arm.
Okay.
I love the face plant. Excuse me, having a little face plant myself.
I thought that was like you were trying to emphasize something there with your cough, but no. So here again, I'm starting to get confused. Is how did we get all this training? Are we still in bad side? Where are we? This isn't a SWAT assault. And then she goes, Gaia isn't the problem. She protects everything human. Because she's like, so they're coming up with this idea of how to turn it off. right? And then she's like, but I don't want to turn it off. She's not the problem. She protects everything human, the bad along with the good. Our real enemy is the pressures that drive us to bad decisions, and she keeps us and that keep us from using her correctly. So she's saying the AI is this tool, and we've got these social pressures that are keeping us from using the tool right. But I think everyone else in there is arguing like, no, like that's just human nature, whether they have social pressures or not. But at the same time, Gaia can be a weapon against us. She takes no sides, so she can serve anybody. This may be our only chance to show that we control our destiny, not her. And I didn't quite get within all of that jumble of ideas what exactly he's suggesting again. I don't know if either of you have an idea on that. And then something about like the fight with this robot resolves it for her. And I'm not quite sure what that was either.
Well, I mean, I think that his limitations as a robot are a little evident, right? I mean, you have a thing that can be controlled. I mean, he's the pencil, right? Somebody else's fingers took his hand, took control of him, and he had to be eliminated.
And then she's still unsure. He's like, time for the big finish, and she's like, yeah. And then they come up with this plan to put apple seeds in the bullets and take the explosive component out, because all they need to do is jam this mechanism here. Because if they cut the power, then this thing's just going to plug in and put in a backup power. So they need to shoot the power out, and then like right at the same time shoot an apple seed into this, that when it clicks down, it basically blocks the backup generator. And she's conflicted about, because she's the one that has to be at the bottom, because Briar Rose's hand's not working as well.
He exploded it in order to kill CODIS.
Yeah, so she has to be the one to block that, and she's kind of like reticent to do that here. And Briar Rose gives her a kiss, and then she's like, what should I do? They're not in balance, those giant scales. A utopia designed for the utopian self, a perfectly constructed toy, to what end, for who? I think that should be for whom.
Yeah,
I
mine says
really
for
like
whom.
that where they flip Hitomi upside down to show that like it's another kind of slowing of time effect,
And she's like, ah.
with even a clock ticking sound effect.
And then she remembers Briar Rose like kissing her, I'm assuming, and that makes up her mind. So I don't know what to take out of that.
I mean, she has kind of a conclusion at the end of this book where it came down to the simple idea that she says, whether Gaia is right or wrong, I can't let her destroy this city because Briar Rose lives there. It's almost like they're building a life in this place, I think is the idea.
Yeah, but it just comes down to like that standard, well, like love is the answer. I'm like, no, it's obviously not. Like,
yeah, but I guess I will say it feels almost like macro versus micro, of like Gaia is trying to control the fate of humanity, and Dunan's decision just goes down to the fate of the individual, and it's almost like individualism versus collectivism almost.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what the whole book has been about in a sense. So that's where I'm like, I don't think you're offering us a third answer. I think you're just dumping us right back into the same.
Let me make a case for a third answer here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll finish the flip through, and then we can really get into it. So, yeah, they stop they stop Gaia, and she does say here, she does say, there wasn't anything to be confused about. I spent all my time worrying about the scales in front of me. I never noticed they were sitting in the tray of an even bigger set of scales. If the other humans can't cope with the pressure, then let them be made into Bioids. And I think, Sean, we're taking different things out of the ending here, maybe. Whether Gaia is right or wrong, I can't let her destroy the city where you live. And that's what you were talking about, Brandon. And then I did like this bit here that Athena says, the
Yeah, well,
first,
hold on. Let's not
okay,
elide the fact that she's being witnessed hugging him on the screen as Athena is watching her.
yeah, and then Athena is like, yeah, curious about that. The stirrings of a new individualism, which again, I don't know if that just means individualism has been gone or if it's a new form of individualism. But she says religion, philosophy, customs, ideology, ethnicity, in our haste to bring them all together, we piled up too many compromises, too many machines. And I think it's interesting that she refers to those things as compromises and in a sense also refers to all those things as machines. Like
Mm-hmm.
religion is a technology of sorts and philosophy is a technology, and like those technologies were compromises in some way. And if we can move into a individualism devoid of any of those collective religion, philosophy, like those collective machines, that might be part of his answer. uh
Right.
so it seems that the problem wasn't human nature after all. The plans for Olympus itself, like a collective city, were too optimistic and were the problem.
Right. And I think that that's your answer right there. She, Athena, is concluding, holy shit, our utopia was just saved by somebody acting out of their own self-interest. A human being who fucks up and does stuff for her own reasons, acting in her own self-interest, saved our utopia. That's the third path, is everybody sticks together, but you try to not squash down the humans. Try not to oppress the individual. You don't have to try to shave off the edges. You let the edges live in conjunction with the collectivists as much as they're possible to be together. And the fact that we just see them, right, is it right after that, all like running farm equipment, repairing the damage to the city.
So
I didn't notice anything
did we
about
read from
farm.
this
Oh,
that
here we go.
Shiro's? Sorry, what were you saying, Carson?
I didn't notice anything about farming at the end of the book. You have like
Not
one
farming.
thing.
Sorry, it's a tractor.
I
They're
read the tractor.
yeah, working through the rubble.
Is the conclusion that Shiro's a libertarian?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably, this is a sort of like very, yeah, individualist.
Yeah, it's interesting. My girlfriend's reading Kira right now, and we had a big discussion about Otomo's nationalism
Hmm.
because it ends with this very like Japan for Japan conclusion where they tell the Americans to fuck off.
Right.
Well, but there's something darker. There's something darker about his individualism there in her statement. And Sean, this is where I think there's something else going on here. If the other humans can't cope with the pressure, then let them be made into bioroids. And so she's explicitly saying, I stopped Gaia from attacking the bioroids, and I'm helping them move forward with their plan to take away their choice to choose, and I'm gonna let them be bioroids. So there's a bit of a suggestion in there that it's not just libertarianism. It's like you talk a lot about Shirow being about competence, and he's basically, I think, suggesting that the only way forward is that all the competent people who actually can, like the three of us disagree about a lot of things, but we're to that point, and me and Tori talk about all this all the time, how like part of what works so good with the channel is me and Sean just let each other do whatever we want.
Sure.
And it works. But most people can't do that. And that, so you get conflict and battle and war and all this shit. And she's basically saying, hey, if they can't grow the fuck up and do it, then fuck it. Let the machine eat them and turn them into other machines. And like those of us who are competent and who can be grown-ups are just going to go over here and do our thing. And I think that's the third path that he's suggesting is, if you're constantly involved in this trying to make a utopia, you're always going to have the conflict between the individual and the society. And so the best thing that an individual can do is just like, fuck it, I'm stepping out of the game. And if other people suck, then they deserve to be turned into robots and enslaved.
This is weirdly going along with my ideology, I think.
Explain.
I've been thinking a lot about how much, essentially individualism, and not like how you don't really need to control all of humanity. I mean, to get into messy politics, there's a lot of stuff about people being worried about like kids' gender stuff and everything. But I've started to believe that like in most people that are functional human beings, a lot of your drives are so ingrained in who you are, and so like my girlfriend's trans, and she grew up in a very Catholic army, like military house, and she figured it out in that. So somebody giving a book to a kid in grade school and being like, maybe you'll solve all your problems being trans, I feel like the individualism of somebody who has their life together and actually figures themselves out will kind of push through, and you will be kind of what you were. And if somebody is so malleable by society, I have a little less sympathy for them. It's a very harsh ideology, but I kind of feel like we need to, at a certain point, everyone's life is their own, and you make your own decisions. And if you make a wrong decision for yourself, at a certain point, that's on you, and it isn't.
Yeah.
And you can't really like coddle all of society. And I think that's kind of the Dunan path, which is a very harsh one.
Yeah, and it does take the political battles out of it in a sense, but like there is a political battle in there too, because people are going to be fighting over like, yeah, if you do give those books to those kids who are malleable, then that could be, and parents are like rightly like, well, I don't want you putting stuff in my malleable kid's head.
Right, but I'm saying let them be bioids.
Yeah, yeah, like, but if they're that malleable, then fuck it, like whether they turn out to be trans because a teacher gave them a book, then they wouldn't have been otherwise. Or
yeah, I don't think those people weren't going to shape the people that are malleable because they read the wrong book or something, and can't criticize it themselves and make what's right for them. I don't think those are, they're going to be led one way or the other.
Yeah, and you take the politics out of it in a sense with that, because then either side that's arguing for the books must be in school or the books must not be in school, it's like if they're not in school, the person who really is will become that anyways. And if they are in school, then the kid who's malleable, they would have been malleable into something else, and like who really cares what kind of thing they're malleable.
Yeah, so that's my very harsh view of humanity, of like I'm all for people having as many choices they want doing whatever their lives, but the people, like, you don't want to put like bumpers on everything and protect everyone at all times, because like Shiro was saying, like conflict can create some fantastic people because they were through some rough things, and having the option is more valuable than not.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing, and it's an interesting view for somebody who lives in. I think it's safe to say that 80s Japan is a society in which the expectations are that you are part of a collective. I would argue that culturally you could see it as a more collectivist country than any portion of the United States at any given time, unless you're talking about.
I wonder if that's why Shiro's work is so American influence, is that he likes the individualist identity.
Right.
Well, but see, this is like the thing. This is where I get a little weird with his stuff, because he is kind of putting individualism versus collectivism as one of the core problems in the book. And it's something that I've been talking about a lot lately on the channel, because I've encountered it since coming to Alabama, is that like when I was in California, I was in a government that's pushing towards a collectivist absolute nightmare.
Sure.
And so and just me naturally, I'm like pretty staunchly idiosyncratic individual person. But since moving to Alabama, where I'm seeing it the other way, I've seen individualism gone so far that it's like, okay, we have a lane that goes this way and a lane that goes this way in the parking lot, and the people down here don't give a fuck. They'll just drive at you down the lane that's an up lane, and it's like, what the fuck are you doing? Yeah, but that kind of selfish mentality that can come with individualism there's like individualism deprived of responsibility that comes with it. And so that's what we were talking to the guys from Free the People about, right? Which is
Okay.
like the if the individuals can't behave, then you have to legislate good behavior for the sake of the collective. You have to like the people here are doing that because the cops aren't giving them tickets, but like they're being dangerous in a parking lot, you know. It's like, just don't be an asshole.
Right.
And
So
so
the middle ground is the ideal, you're saying.
yeah, we're like, okay, like the ideal would be individualism, but if you have that, you have to be an adult and fucking behave. And if you don't behave, then things have to move towards collectivism, and you don't want either.
We kind of broached Robert Heinlein in the discussion with the Free to people, and I think that Heinlein is a really good touchstone for Shirow in that sense, because you have those sort of conflicts, but both sort of take it for granted that the stasis point is going to be some type of law, even if you disagree with the law. And I think Shirow, his cultural standpoint, takes that for granted. Like, okay, I live in a country where this is the collectivist approach is the dominant thing. And Heinlein, it's the fact that he grew up in a time in which everything was so restricted, and blue laws and all those things controlled your actions so much that you had to pay a sort of certain base level to the facade in order to get away with the things that you actually got to do if you just shut up at the right times, and both of them sort of probably had to navigate a lot of those things personally. And I think that even though they're very different and come from very different backgrounds, I think there's a sort of crossover where both of them gravitate towards heroes that have that ultra competency, and with that competency comes the ability to be the deviant. The
In a
Heinlein
system
hero,
still.
yeah, exactly. The Heinlein hero gets to deviate because he or she is very good at putting on the facade at the right time and being kind to people at the right time and respecting the letter of the law when they need to, and then is so smart that they can go do whatever the fuck they want to afterwards, right? Dionin has a righteous sense of order, and she respects the order at the same time that she knows that she's above it in the moments that she needs to be.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense, because then he's not proposing. See, I thought he was trying to be like, we haven't got the right mix for utopia yet, but he's saying there is no such thing. If you really get my message, it will be good for your life.
Right, exactly.
But like even trying to explain it to other people. So I think that's smart of him, actually, because he's like, if I tell you explicitly, it kills it, and so we're killing it. I'm sorry, we've killed it on this episode, but I mean that makes sense to me. I get it now. Yeah, I agree with you, Shirow.
How do you, Brandon? Have you broached the Heinlein? Do you feel?
I was just grabbing Farnham's Freehold behind me while you're talking, which is like this is one of my favorite Heinlein books because it's one of the messiest.
Yeah,
it's where a family is at ground zero for a nuclear explosion, which propels them into the future, where they become slaves to a future kind of African cannibal society. And it's
Afrofuturism.
It's Afrofuturism. It's basically like the dark side of Wakanda, because they're cannibals and they keep slaves.
That movie really will not get made today.
What's that? No, it's not. I mean, and if you look at reviews of it, it's hilarious. It's very like, because a lot of what Heinlein did, I think, was him trying to be very progressive in the 1950s and things that we now look at like, because he's talking about racism, but his way of doing it is like, look at these racist Black people. And he's bending it with science fiction, but I think when you're in modern America, it can read a little like, oh, this is a weird critique of just Black people and not racism in general.
Yeah, well, you're missing the context, but it's similar though. Starship Troopers, which gets criticism for other reasons, had the main character is Hispanic and doesn't say it. He doesn't describe himself in a way you would pick that up unless you read the entire book, and that was very subversive for the time. He was going to have hero of a young adult book be a Hispanic guy, and is not going to mention the race of any of the characters. Even something basic like that in like 58 or 57.
Oh yeah, I think he just mentions the city. They're in like Argentina or something.
Yep.
Hmm.
That's right.
It's an interesting, that's actually something I always hate but really enjoy talking to my art appreciation classes about, because we're talking about different not critical theories, because I don't want to say critical theory is one of the theories you could use to criticize art under, right? And then you could subclass that into feminist critical theory, critical race theory, whatever. But also you can have like a contextual criticism or a formal criticism or whatever. And so I'm going through all those different things with them, and then I have to talk about critical theory as one of the things. And so I like to show them the painting Olympia. Do you know that one,
Yeah.
Sean? Brandon, I don't know if you would
Fantastic.
know that painting.
Oh no, I don't know that at all.
It's a Manet.
She's got nice tits.
Yeah, it's a Manet painting that at the time was super progressive. It's like
Okay.
a well-known prostitute sitting there naked, confronting the audience, not worried about her nudity. There's no male gaze going on in the sense, like she's very comfortable. So
Oh, the male gays don't care about tits at all.
no, not at all.
She's chilling on her chaise lounge or whatever, like with a choke collar.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you think it aged in a way that looks different now?
Well, and there's a black woman behind her, and that was also like at the time very progressive for him to even put a black person in the painting.
Even though she would have, people like her in her job would have been ubiquitous in the society that they're talking about. They wouldn't have been depicted.
Yeah, but now this painting is seen as like super fucking racist. Like I've seen friends get in debates about their peers using it for like a poster advertising their class. Like, how dare they post this racist painting? And because it was like, you're depicting slavery. And then also, like, depending on which kind of feminist you are, you can either critique it for the male gaze, or you can say, look at this powerful woman not giving a fuck. So it kind of depends, which political theory you ascribe to. And I show that to them because it is one of those things that when Manet painted that, he was as fucking left-wing as you could get. And then, 100 and however many years later, a lot of people see it as a super regressive painting. And I think it's important for them to understand how it sat in its original context, like Heinlein in his original context being progressive, now seeming regressive. And the danger of just writing that off as like it's racist, and it's like, but understand the context. You can see it as like, hey, yeah, like it's representing something that was problematic, but also understand like it was because of people like this making statements like this that we've been continuing to be able to get to where we're at. And
yeah,
we don't
so it's hard to see the critiques of it as anything but like people that are lacking context and are kind of just looking to be angry.
Yeah, and so it's like always a discussion I'm really scared to have with students, but it's like also a discussion that you need to have about like context matters when you're looking at these kinds of things. But we've gotten far off. I don't know, but context of Shirow is, holy shit, you were way ahead of your time, because he's predicting the context that we're living in now, and the debates that we're having now. Spot on. It's amazing.
Yeah, very much. And the appendix of this book puts things in an even weirder perspective when a character from the Dark Crystal shows up.
What?
Oh yeah.
Is this old lady? It is.
She just 100% just draws the witch from the Dark Crystal in here at a jewelry shop.
Oh shit, I didn't get that. It's been so long since I've watched that movie. That is. What is that a symbol for? That's and she's selling crystals and talking about the silver crystal. Dang, Brandon.
And they're in a gun shop too, which is a weird thing. And there's all these little ads in the back of it. Like he has the Puma sisters from his Dominion books. Names are on a coffee shop in the background.
In this very last page. Oh no, on this.
Oh yeah,
the
and
loophole.
when they're kind of walking into the thing. And also,
okay.
V.2 from the villain from Dominion is also in the first panel of that page.
I haven't read that. Well, I don't have a camera pointed at the book for you anymore. Where's he at? This bottom, hiding behind the bush here.
Yeah, he's hiding behind the bush. And then what is Yoshi's t-shirt? It says GEB Douglas R. Hofstades. So I assume it's another reference book he was looking at.
Maybe.
I love the gun. The Briaros's reaction to the gun shop. Get a load of these antiques. Briaros, they've got a custom Steyr GB like the one my dad used in that crime prevention poster.
And there's so few images, I think, of her father, Carl Newt. I think they don't
Right.
show him very often. He's always blurred out in the background.
Yeah.
So it'd be cool to see a version of the crime prevention poster with a gun.
Yeah.
Oh, is that the one, the smoking ad?
Oh, that would be great. No, I don't the smoking head doesn't quite have a face, does it?
No.
Yeah, but that could be like a blurry photo of that poster. I don't
I
know.
like the idea of that, of her rescuing someone in front of a poster of her father.
That would be good.
Somebody who likely has her father's DNA. by
Yeah,
the way.
because her father's
yeah.
DNA was used for the Bioids, right?
He's
Mhm.
one of the founders. He's one of the poppies, which is why I think you could argue that's possibly some of the basis of the relationship with Hitomi. Hitomi definitely seems like she's based on the inside information that she kind of idolizes her a little bit.
And Hitomi's a Bioroid, correct?
Yes.
Like, why was her DNA so important to opening the Gaia system? I didn't catch
so
that.
that was the other little thing that we didn't really. So on one hand, they kind of use it like a MacGuffin, right? Like Hitomi's the key that needs to unlock it. I mean, it's essentially the equivalent of like the Robotech singer that needs to sing in the front of the ship to kill all the aliens or whatever.
Right.
On the other hand, it kind of reinforces it a little bit that she's part of the circle that had to break in there, even though she's not necessarily effective at anything that she's doing while she's there, that she's sort of part of the, she's part of the circle, she's part of the plan, she's part of the future.
But why was it her and not any other Bioroid? It's just because she was any Bioroid could get in, or how did she have
I
that
think
access?
she's just the key. She's the one that, I mean, there's a little bit of like I don't remember exactly what it is, but there's some kind of gamesmanship around it earlier where they talked about her like she's important.
I just never picked up on why.
She's like the keys to the city,
Oh,
How do you
okay.
guys feel about her hair in this scene?
In which one? The end scene?
Yeah.
Oh, with the braids on it?
Well, I mean, it's cultural appropriation.
It's very wasn't there like a James Bond lady that did have that her like that in a famous scene?
I was thinking about the half black singer from the 80s who had that style of hair.
I don't know what that. Yeah,
Ricky.
that doesn't have any kind of cultural reference for me. But also, you got to remember, I grew up with no TV, so the 80s and 90s are totally
basically
lost.
she has her hair in braids with little brackets at the bottom of them.
Yeah. No, I
and
wouldn't
then
make
the issue
anything of
ends
that.
with them talking about the difference between humans and Bioroids, because Dunan only gets a necklace because she's an original human and not a Bioroid, which could be seen as a little bit weird. And then you see Yoshi obsessed with motorcycles, and Dunan saying, "Looks like Bioroids still have a few things in common with humans." And the last panel is Hitomi electro-shocking Yoshi while he's holding pictures of motorcycles, so he no longer likes them so much.
Yeah,
time for your Pavlovian treatment, darling.
Well, she's mad because he's like more lusting over the bikes than after her. But the majority of this conversation is them kind of explaining that the Bioroids have this like kind of re-up on their life, and that there's certain privileges that the humans can get them too, like they can get like a life extension, but if you go for the life extension, then you can't, like the grandma's at least what does it say? I don't know, there's something where she's, I'll only sell them to you if you swear to never get a life extension treatment. And then she says, all right, my lucky day, I'm covered by the new Original Species Act. I'm not eligible for a life extension. So there's something in there where it's like the real humans can choose to not become bioroids, like if they so want, but
Right. And
then
there's
they
also
don't
a
get a
point out
life
that
extension. But if you want a life extension, then you have to become a bioroid and behave. But then
right.
she says, when I die, I'm gonna have a clone made anyways. And then it's like it's your spirit I've been talking about, not your body. So there's this last little bit of like mysticism there at the end, which, if I'm correct, one of his other books has a magical system that he works out in it. Is
Yeah,
that correct, Brandon?
Oh yeah, and Orion.
yeah, Ryan. Right.
So it seems like some kind of connection there where he's making some, and he goes into the spirit a lot in Ghost in the Shell and Souls,
Well,
obviously.
geez, wait to see Orion, man.
Oh
You're
yeah,
gonna
Ryan
love
would
that.
really will give us all a headache, but it's a very beautiful book.
It is beautiful if you like the lettering, because you're going to see a lot of it.
Oh yeah. Oh, I
But
wanted to point out that they mention here that that humans are not permitted to crossbreed with bioroids either. So I wonder if you get a life extension and become a bioroid, suddenly you can have a kid with a bioroid.
oh yeah.
There might be practical reasons why they can't crossbreed as well. If they're getting life extensions, you might have some kind of issues. I doubt that they reproduce naturally. If
I'm going to say different genitals.
right.
But that's actually kind of interesting because that's another thing Luciano talks about a lot that he's getting right then, is that you don't ever want to force things, but you can, like, forcing something, legislating something is always the worst ethical option, but an ethically good option is to design good choices. And so they're designing like, hey, like there's all these benefits to becoming a bioroid if you so choose, and if more people become bioroids, the world will be a better place, but respecting the individual choice to stay a human. And a competent human would probably choose preserving their individuality.
Right.
And yeah, okay, that's an interesting thought as well. But then there's something about the soul in there, which I'd think I'd have to read his other books to pick up on. Also, very just, I'll note, people can go to other videos for all my ranting about trees lately, but the fact that he used the seed, the apple seed, and used a bioengineered seed that's round. I didn't know apple seeds are round. Oh, that's a weird round seed. He is suggesting something about treeness and going back to those original, the whole thing's called Appleseed for a reason, and I think he is talking about that seed of the individual.
Well, going back to Eden.
Yeah. And like before biting the apple.
Right, prior to biting the apple.
Okay. Or do you think that he made the apple seed circular just because he was figuring out how logistics of how it would work with a gun?
Yeah, and then it was like, oh, but it's bioengineered.
No, I think it's because I think it's because it resonates with the bioroids. I mean, the necessary component in each case is Hitomi or the Appleseed, both of which have been created to be more flawless, but they are ultimately more close to the pencil, and Dunin is more close to the fingers.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
And that the closer you get to the tree, the original tree, like the pre-sin state, you are kind of hitting that individual who's also not a piece of shit.
Do you guys get the idea in reading this that Shirow was struggling with his ideas, or do you think he had a clear ideology that he was just wanting to carve out?
I feel like, I don't know, I'd have to read his other work, but given that I know he has like a worked out mystical system and he's so explicit and like prophetic about the future, it strikes me as, and all the obsessive notes in Ghost in the Shell and stuff, the real need to explain himself, it strikes me, and at the early age too, it strikes me that this guy got a download revelation moment in his life, and I don't think he's struggling. I really think he's telling people something.
Well, and I mentioned this in one of the other videos. I think there's a kind of sadness for me about it too, because I feel like this is the statement that is needed to be made, and maybe some of the other stuff is a little bit more reactive You know, maybe it's reactive to audience, maybe it's reactive in frustration that people didn't get the thing, maybe it's reactive in frustration that he didn't get the thing, like he felt like he got details wrong. There were some footnotes where he kind of like, I was wrong when I postulated this in Appleseed, so here's another take. You know, I, it must be really hard to be such a high functioning person in a society that doesn't know how to reward those things necessarily. Doesn't
Right. And it's also camouflaged in this thing where a huge amount of his fan base is probably so focused on like what a cool gun robot you did that would be most of the, and even I mean I think I talked about this early on when we were doing the videos about how that keeps away a section of the people that would really appreciate these books because it's in a comic book form and it's about like sexy cyborg cops than people who are like really like striving to be intellectual, especially in America. It's like you're going to be reading Astros Polyp and not Appleseed.
Yeah, and I think like that is a problem too that could lead to a lot of frustration is when he's such obviously a genius guy who, you know, what like when I mean revelation, I just mean that he was such a brilliant mind that he had consumed so much that he obviously like and just fucking played all of this out very fast. It would probably be a little hard for him to see that other 18-year-olds weren't playing that shit out that fast. And so when your audience is like, I saw this stuff when I was 18 and I Ghost in the Shell, and I remember not knowing what the hell it was about. And I was like, the art's cool as hell, but I don't know what this is. Like, I couldn't make heads or tails of it. It took, you know, 20 years of reading philosophy and thinking to catch up with even being able to start to unpack this dude's stuff. Yeah, that had to have been wildly disappointing for him. And I mean, we're hitting that barrier too with Abolition of Man, right? Like people are going in expecting a comic and we're giving them a couple dense philosophy essays and they're like, the fuck is this? But like no one who's reading Luciano's stuff is probably going and buying a comic book either. Like, so it is a weird, and then yeah, you wrap that in guns and like sexy cyborgs and like who was his audience, you know, like ideal audience.
Yeah, because he was winning. I remember reading that the first Appleseed won a science fiction award that they said was like the equivalent of the Hugo Awards in Japan. So hopefully it got appreciated by a small minority of people that really clicked with it.
I would assume that's why his legacy lasts, right? I mean, why people, especially Ghost in the Shell, like something about that clicked with people. I don't know to the full extent that he intended it. I'd have to go watch the movies again to see.
I think he got a legacy that he didn't intend, is my impression, because I know with Ghost in the Shell, certainly in America, I think people are really big fans of the movie adaptation, and I'm very much on the wrong side of history because I feel like the movie of Ghost in the Shell, I regard Ghost in the Shell as not as good as Appleseed, but the same themes, and then I regard the Ghost in the Shell movie as like an even dumber version, where it's basically like I always think there's a scene where she's like, it's these very 1980s science fiction ideas where she's like sitting there with her chest heaving, being like, what does it mean to be a human or not? And the animators are too obsessed with getting her nipples right. And the idea of like what is a person and what is artificial, I feel like that's Philip K. Dick level stuff that was figured out before, where Shirow's like at his peak is so far beyond that.
Yeah, and like reading the first volume of Ghost in the Shell for the first time, I didn't realize that it's not one story. It's basically a bunch of short stories for at least a long time. It's just a bunch of short stories, and each one's like a little petri dish for him to explore some other idea about AI. And so I'm really curious about, okay, I got to go back and watch the anime, which I watched, you know, in like 1997 or something. And I thought, I don't know what this is about. And then the shitty Scarlett Johansson movie, like I need to go back and rewatch those and be like, what the hell did they even pick up on? Because reading volume 1, it's like there's nothing in here that says, yeah, this is a movie.
It's about her haircut. It's about her haircut and the buildings that he designed and her basic body silhouette. I mean, that's exactly what it is. I mean, I hate to break it to you, but that's what the adaptation takes from the source. And yeah, it's not the same. He's writing in a different fashion, and he's writing with a sort of, I mean, it's hard to have a story that doesn't have a person at its core.
Yeah, interesting side note about the Ghost in the Shell movie is Jim Mahfood actually did some designs for that.
Ah.
Well, it's beautiful.
And that's the guy whose name I was struggling with. I was struggling to think of Jim Mahfood's name, and I was texting Brandon. I was like, who's this guy that does like graffiti art? He does a bunch of variant covers. And then I figured it out. And then Brandon was like, oh, yeah, of course.
Oh yeah, have you guys had Jim on? He's fantastic.
No,
Oh, would love to.
It's one of my
I'd
favorite
love to.
dudes.
Well, speaking of having people on, I'm going to have Santa. Wait, what?
Santa. Santa.
We're recording this at 10:30 at night. My kids wake up early. I
Okay.
don't know where I was going. I think I was going to do some type of like Santa Claus riff, thinking that it was like.
I like it.
I wanted to know where that came from, like where you short circuited on Santa there. You
broke
feel like
Sean.
you're gonna turn into Santa if you stay up much later and your children are gonna worry about you going down that large black pipe behind you.
I say if
Well,
he can do it, let him.
yeah, on camera, please.
What do I need to dance on the pipe?
No, we just want you
Or
to go
slide
down it.
down the pipe. Okay.
No,
Okay.
we were talking about you physically turning into Santa Claus magic, I thought, and going through the pipe to deliver presents to children all over the world.
Yeah,
makes
to go
more sense than-
downstairs. Yeah,
It
down
makes more
through
sense
the
than
pipe.
the pole action that I was all of a sudden imagining and now realizing is very plausible in this space.
Well, this is obviously dissolving as me and Sean's old man brains are sleepy, and Brandon's young man video game making Las Vegas life is just waking up. So
Oh, I'm just aging backwards like Benjamin Button out here.
God bless you.
Well, it's fantastic to talk to you again, Brandon. Hopefully we can rope you into recording some Formalism Fridays sometime soon so we can get those going again. But
Certainly.
Either way, it's great to talk to you, and it's great to crack this book. I have to say, if you're a crazy person, if you listen to all these videos or watched all these videos and haven't read this book, but if you haven't read this book, this is the Shirow book that you need, and get the big one so you can see all the details and everything. But man, what a great book! If anybody's looking for some Robert Heinlein to read, Brandon, you and your girlfriend might really enjoy alternating between his two mid-70s books, Time Enough for Love, and the one about the businessman who gets his secretary's brain inside him.
I don't think I know that one.
That's a really weird title.
Because my
I would
favorite
like
Heinlein
to-
is Friday, I think, which is it's kind of
Oh,
messy
Friday.
one, but it's
Yeah.
really fascinating.
This one is came out right before Time Enough for Love, so 73. If you just look at whatever book he came out in 73, it's fantastic. But he was dying at the time he wrote both of those books. He had a really bad illness, and as a result, he just sort of like wanted to get everything out. Like I'm a not old man. He was only in his 60s. He ended up living for another 15 years after both that, but he just wanted to get everything out, and as a result, they're more didactic than most of his stuff, but they're really, really fascinating and lots of very interesting, like gender fuckery from a libertarian perspective, stuff that's really, really exciting. Lazarus Long, the character who's lived for 3,000 years, is been kidnapped by his relatives, and who basically want him to live forever. And he's basically like, I'm bored. I've seen everything. And they get him to tell stories in order to keep him alive while they look for things to entertain him.
And could obviously easily be adapted into a porno given his name.
Lazarus Long Dong is his entire name.
Lazarus Schlong, like there it is.
Anyway, I would highly recommend it. If you like Appleseed, you would at the very least be entertained by both those ideas. And it's similar to Appleseed in the sense that both are fertile imaginations, like dropping lots of little gems for you to take a look at. So
The fertile Lazarus Long.
Yeah, I was thinking in the same way Friday is its similarity. Heinlein's Friday is similar to Appleseed, and it is about an artificial human's place in society, but it's from the point of view of the artificial human who almost has it like a secret. Like at one point she's in a group marriage that find out she's an artificial human and kick her out.
Oh, I got to start reading these books.
Oh, you'd love it, man. You'd probably be infuriated by some detail about each one, but they're great. He was a tremendous thinker and a really entertaining writer. He knew where his bread was buttered, so he always kept that entertaining.
He liked butter on his backside.
Butter on the old backside of the butter. R.H. Heinlein. I read that book of his letters, which is really fascinating. It's called Grumbles from the Grave, and his wife published it after he died, and it was just a lot of it is just him writing his editor back and forth and different publishers and things. And one of the major problems he's dealing with is how to deal with fan mail. And eventually him and his wife just have postcards that they check off, like, thanks for writing me about this, and they send them back just to like get it out of their lives as much as possible.
Like a flow chart. Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for taking all these detours with us. And if you made it to the end of I haven't done this in a while. If you made it to the end of this video and you're hearing my words right now, and you can tell us what Heinlein book that Brandon is currently reading, I will send you a prize in the mail.
The first person in America.
First person
in America.
First person in America who can
no Bioids.
Who can tell me what no Bioids at all? Who can tell me what book that Brandon is currently reading by Robert Heinlein? We'll get a prize.
The first person's always like someone from Australia, and then Sean has to ship like a 2.02 ounce comic to Australia, and it costs like $80 or something. So yeah, first American to answer that question. But anyways, we all need to go to bed except for Brandon. So thank you for following along, everyone. Take it easy. Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.